Hello everyone and welcome to our continued card review series for the Boomsday Project. We're going to be doing Rogue up next. Pandemonia and I have a rating scale here going 1 to 5, where 1 are your trash unplayable cards like Duskfall and Aviana, 2 your fringe playable or niche tech cards, Dire Frenzy, Marcy Horror come to mind, 3 are your cards that are playable in some decks like Life Drinker, 4 are your cards that are staple across multiple decks, or particularly multiple decks in a class when they're class cards, like Houndmaster Shaw. And 5 are your cards that are prevalent across multiple decks in the meta, or they define a specific archetype that is a relevant archetype in the meta. So a good example of the latter is Shadowwalk. So let's have a look here at Rogue Pandemonia. First up, we have Myra Rotspring. Myra Rotspring is a 5-mana 4/2 legendary minion with Battlecry. Discover a Deathrattle minion. Also gain its Deathrattle. So you get a card in the hand and a Deathrattle on the board. How much is that worth to you?
So, I mean, that's pretty. I mean, like, the effect is a pretty cool. Like, it's a pretty good effect. The problem for me, the major problem, and why I do not like Myra is a 5-mana 4/2. The body is exceptionally weak. Sure, you're going to discover a Deathrattle, and I mean, you draw a card, so it's 5-mana 4/2, draw a card and get a Deathrattle. How much does that? What does the Deathrattle need to do to be good? And like currently, one of the, let's say, stronger Deathrattles that I think spring to mind is Ken's Deathrattle.
Yeah.
And then, in the case of me getting Ken's Deathrattle, wait, why am I not just playing Ken instead?
Exactly. I mean, in this case, you do actually get a Ken in your hand, so you can play it on
I'm spending
turn
5
6.
mana for 4/2. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what's getting me, is
I mean,
that poor stat line.
Myra is purely a value engine, right? I mean, we've seen them do this so many times with Rogue, printing these kind of Deathrattle value engines, and that's not really what Rogue wants to do a lot of the time with their Deathrattles.
I mean, Zaro he gave you the toxin, right?
Yeah. But Zaro, I felt like, was more of a tempo tool even, because those toxins were decent tempo cards rather than like value specifically.
Sure.
But yeah, Zaro was a good example of an actual an actual like Deathrattle legendary the Rogue actually cared about. But that had nothing to do with any kind of Deathrattle synergy, right? Anyway, back to Myra. I mean, ultimately, it has to give you a pretty powerful Deathrattle. And the one other thing to remember is, because this is Discover, we're looking at a tendency towards getting offered more Rogue Deathrattle cards. And the Rogue Deathrattle cards are pretty weak.
Pretty terrible.
I mean, the one we have from this set, Blightnose Crawler, is probably arguably one of the stronger ones. I mean, we have Bone Baron, where you just get 2 1/1s in hand. That's very weak.
5-mana 4/2. When it dies, summon 2 1/1s.
No, not summon.
No, they go to your
hand. It's even worse. Yeah. You're going to get offered Bone Baron, a fairly high percentage on this card, and that is definitely not something you want to see. What are some of the other Deathrattles? Cobalt Illusionist. That's not going to do much in most of the decks you're playing Myra Rotspring. And then, of course, we also have the Blightnose Crawler.
We said the Blightnose Crawler.
Yep.
You've got a lot of card draw effects like Loot Order, Blood Mage Thanos.
Yeah, you've got Sherazin.
Some of them summon small bodies.
I mean, Sherazin will turn this into you'll be able to recur it once. It's not going to persist in the same way Sherazin does, because the thing that gives Myra the Deathrattle is its battle cry. So after you res it the first time, it'll just die again. So it's just a worse Sherazin in that scenario.
Oh wow! Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, then you've got like a lot of the which spawn tokens, but I mean, most of them are usually lackluster, like 1/1s or 2/1s. Like I said, the best one is Ken.
Yeah, the only other Rogue one is Cursed Castaway, which is going to draw you a combo card. And I mean, once again, you can kind of curve Myra Rotspring into Cursed Castaway, but I feel like that's a very, very meh curve for Rogue. There's a lot more powerful things Rogue needs to be doing at those points in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of the 5-drop spots, in terms of Rogue decks, the question kind of I ask myself is like, why am I not playing? Well, okay, so obviously Valspine Slayer is not really a 5-drop a lot of times, but I mean, Cobalt Scalebane is usually just a better 5-drop.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's a bunch of also like relatively negative Deathrattles, or very weak Deathrattles. I mean, like Sated Threshodon, where you just get 3 1/1s, is pretty meh. Even some of the other death rattles like
Or Violet Worm, you get 7 1/1s.
Sure. I mean, like, Carnivorous Cubes one gives you nothing, and the worst
Yeah.
one is, like, Ticking Abomination that blows up your own board. But, I mean,
So-
it is
so- so
Discover,
what-
so you're not going to have to pick those, but there's enough bad ones that you're not going to want to pick a lot of the time.
Yeah, when it's ticking Abomination,
Voodoo
Cube,
Doll.
and Voodoo Doll. I mean, on the bright side, at least Voodoo Doll, you actually get a copy of it in your hand. But it's still
yeah.
the proc. But
Yeah, I mean-
so
That's the key thing. You are still getting a card in your hand, and that's the maybe the one saving grace here. If that part didn't happen on Myra, it would be a straight up 1. But for me, like, I'm not convinced it's that horrible. So I'm gonna give it a 2.
yeah, it's a 1 for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. I think that's entirely reasonable. But speaking about unreasonable cards, we have Myra's Unstable Element. I think we lost Pandemonia for a sec there, but Myra's Unstable Element, 5 mana spell, draw the rest of your deck. So
Yeah.
how often do you want to draw the rest of your deck, Pandemonia?
Well, I mean, a combo deck every day of the week. You know, like a combo deck,
Yeah,
you generally
but
want cards.
In a
The
combo
problem is
deck,
you might lose the combo pieces.
exactly. That's the problem.
It's a very powerful effect. As to like how to use it, this is definitely one of the cards that's difficult to, like, it's either like crazy bonkers, like a 4 or 5, or it's just a 1. Like, because like I said, it's a very powerful effect. I mean, sure, you can if you prep it out even.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's turn 2, you could theoretically go prep Myra, have your whole deck, and be on the borderline of fatigue.
Yeah.
Why you want to do that? You know, maybe, you know, you want to go for the poker hopper memes. You know, maybe you want to try some shit.
And Lab Recruiter is kind of the one thing you can do there. But I mean, the key is you either have to have all the cards you want in your deck, or want to play the game in your hand if you're going to do some kind of recurring thing like that, or you need to have a deck where you don't mind burning half your deck, you just need extra resources. So it's something that you want to use in like an aggro match or in an aggro deck when you're kind of running low on resources.
Yeah, when you know, okay, these are the last 10 cards, go all in kind of vibes.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think it might be potentially good. So like, I think a deck that loses, I'm going to give it a 5 because I think it's literally going to make decks that are revolve around it entirely.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely skew how you build your deck, and it'll also make it so that the decks that do use it and make good use of Myra's Unstable Element will be incredibly powerful. It's definitely not going to be something that slots into every rogue deck, though, but you're going to see some decks that are kind of defined by it. Mostly looking at like Odd Rogue right now because of that's kind of the most aggressive rogue archetype we have. But there are other maybe aggressive rogue decks where if you're playing cards like Falderai Strider, you can actually get all of those spiders straight onto the board as well, which is pretty powerful. If you're paying 5 mana to also fill your board with 4/4s, then I'm even more keen on this card.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So, next card we're going to talk about is interesting card. 5 mana, epic spell, Necrium Vial, trigger friendly minions death rattle twice. So, I'll be honest, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, good lord, Blizzard's just trying to shove more rogue death rattle nonsense down our throat. But then, you know, when I thought about it carefully, discussed it, then I realized, okay, maybe there's, you know, potential combos with, like, you know, Leroy, Carnivorous Cube, you know, and we'll see a bit of that, we'll see one of the decks that we're going to talk about later. So, like, this card purely hinges on if those sort of combos are good enough to be competitive, you know, in sort of on ladder and in tournaments. And basically, if that deck is a thing, Necrium Vial is a 2 for me because of that. Yeah, it will be an enabler of the combo. Otherwise, it's obviously just going to be absolute trash, right? Because I don't think you want this in sort of a value deck for 5 mana.
Yeah. I mean, if Carnivorous Cube Play Dead, Terrascale Stalker, even Sacrificial Pact have taught us anything, it's that the power in Death Rattles is being able to activate them on your own turn a lot of the time, especially with Carnivorous Cube. And for Necrium Vial, I mean, I think this is basically the weaker form of that for Rogue. We'll see it coming up a bit later with Necrium Blade. But I think Necrium Vial is something that you're going to only ever put in a deck where you're putting in Necrium Blade as well. And then I'm not convinced I really want many Necrium Vials in that deck because I don't know how much redundancy I actually want for the ability to proc my Death Rattles. So I think at most, a lot of the time, it's going to be a one-of, unless it's a very specific combo piece where you need to trigger it twice. So I'm going to say it's a 2.
Yeah, it's a 2 for me. Easy 2.
Okay, and then as our resident academic, do you want to tell us about the next card?
So this one, it's called a 4-mana epic spell, Academic Espionage. Shuffle 10 cards from your opponent's class into your deck. They cost 1. So this is literally just a giant meme, right? Like, the fact that, first of all, obviously depends on what your opponent's class is.
Yeah.
Then second of all, like, sure, you can high roll, but the fact that it's random cards, this is just a meme fest. It's a clown fiesta. So
yeah, I mean,
sure, there's going to be the shoulder videos of someone.
Yeah, it has synergy obviously with Myra's Unstable Element that we just mentioned. But, I mean, overall, this playing cards from your opponent's class thing has proved to not be very powerful. The only caveat is that mana reduction effects have proven to be very powerful in Hearthstone. And that's the one scary thing for me about Academic Espionage. But as you mentioned, you kind of have to high roll those anyway.
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can already imagine the children videos of 1-mana Ultimate Infestations, or 1-mana Tyrians, or 1-mana Pyroblasts, or 1-mana Prophet. I mean, like, let's say you have 1-mana Prophet Villains. Obviously, it can just end the game. Like, games can just literally be won or lost in it. But is it a good card? I would say if you look over a large enough sample size, the answer is probably no. So this is an easy one for me.
I think the mana cost reduction is something not to be underestimated. I think there's even potential to play it as a one-of in decks that tend to draw themselves out pretty quickly.
Miracle Rogue?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Like, I don't want to play this in Miracle Rogue, but maybe. I mean, maybe it's enough to push the test package as well for, like, the late game. But I'm not convinced by that. Overall, though, I mean, it is something that also works well with Sprint. Even if you're sprinting without prepping the sprint, you're going to have some extra mana to actually play these one-cost cards. So it has synergy there as well. So, I mean, I think it's a 2. I think there's actually a little bit of potential because of that cost reduction. And like reducing them to 1, that can be a very extreme cost reduction.
Pyroblast, easy.
Sure. I mean, it's not only the spells, though. It's also like the minions and stuff. Which the average cost of, class cards is a lot higher than 1. So on average, you're winning in terms of mana cost.
Obviously, sure, in terms of mana cost, but
yeah. But if you're playing against a paladin, for example, it's going to be a lot worse for you most of the time because there's a lot of 1-mana secrets you can get that are really bad. So it a little bit depends on the class you're playing. It's going to feel much better against Druid, I would say, than anyone else.
Druid, Priest, with like expensive, powerful options. Like I said, 1-mana Mind Control, boys. Like.
Yeah. So a 1 for you, 2 for me.
A 1, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then next up we have Blightnose Crawler. So this is another...
Blight Nozzle.
Oh, Blight Nozzle, sorry. Blight Nozzle Crawler. 4-mana 2/4 mech with Deathrattle. Summon a 1/1 ooze with Poisonous and Rush. The Deathrattle is not so bad. It's kind of a removal effect on the Deathrattle. The big question for me is in most of my Rogue decks, why do I not want to rather just play Vilespine Slayer? Rogue is a class that has many ways to activate the combo. So it's not like unreasonable to rather favor a combo versus the Deathrattle, which has more ways your opponent can interact with it. Silences and transform effects mostly. And then, I mean, the big question becomes like through taunts, it's an issue. It's worse than straight up removal through taunts, for instance. But I mean, mostly it's just its synergy with Necrium Blade that I think can maybe make it viable in certain circumstances.
Yeah. My problem is a 4-mana 2/4 bad stats.
Yeah.
It doesn't have taunt, firstly. So the problem is, like, my feeling is most of the times my opponent is going to be popping the death rattle,
Yeah.
and then can generally quite easily, many classes can just deal with the 1/1 poisonous in their turn. So
Exactly.
this all comes down to, so sure, if Necrium Blade, the interaction with this is good enough, where you can get the 1/1 to trade already, it might be okay. But I think without any, let's say like without Necrium Blade, I think it's just trash.
Yeah, I think if Negrin Blade didn't exist, I'd probably be tempted to give it a 1. But I think it does maybe have a little bit of potential to reach to 2. So I'm going to give it a 2.
I'm gonna give it a
Overall,
1.
though, I'm not convinced. I don't know if it's ever relevant that it's a mech. I mean, I'm not really planning on playing mech rogue, but it is exactly where I want my mechs in a way, in terms of at 4 mana, because the strongest magnetic minions, I think, in War Gear and Ziliax, kind of you can curve into it, and they kind of incentivize to remove it. I just think that most of the time they're going to make better use, or they're going to have just too many good ways to deal with that 1/1 ooze. And that's the big issue.
That's a 1 for me.
Yeah, okay, but moving on to Necrium Blade. Necrium Blade is a 3 mana 3/2 weapon. It has Death Rattle. Trigger the Death Rattle of a random friendly minion. So I'm going to just talk about this card for a little bit because of how much I like it. At first I was like, oh no, more Death Rattle stuff for Rogue. Nah, this is annoying. And then I looked at it and I was like, actually, it's Death Rattle triggering. That can generally be quite powerful. And the most powerful thing about it is that you can front load the mana for it. So you can play Necrium Blade, attack with it the first time, and then hold it and wait to attack the second time with Necrium Blade when you play your powerful Death Rattle. So something like Carnivorous Cube, or some of the other combos we'll see coming up later. I don't want to talk about too many of the combos now, because we'll talk about them when we look at the deck lists. But overall, I actually think Necrium Blade is an extremely powerful card because it is the cheapest Death Rattle activation we will see. The only caveat is if there's a lot of weapon destruction running around because of cards like Aluneth, Skull of Minari, and Twig of the World Tree, then you might be a little bit more tempted to rely on Necrium Vial than Necrium Blade.
Yeah, so I think it's a really powerful card. I think it's gonna, for me, this is a 4. I think it's gonna help like any deck that has any other rogue decks with Death Rattle synergy. It helps a lot. I don't think, like, my reason I don't think it's a 5 is because I don't think you end up deciding to play Death Rattle based purely on the card. I think the card helps a lot, but I don't think it makes or breaks the archetype.
I think Necrium Blade is the only reason to play Death Rattle Rogue. Straight
Really?
up, like
Okay.
I think that if Necrium Blade didn't exist, I would not play Death Rattle Rogue. Or if Necrium Blade's effect was a Battle Cry instead of a Death Rattle, I would not play Death Rattle Rogue. Any rogues that have Death Rattle in it, and that's the key for me. So I think Necrium. I mean, maybe if it was a Battle Cry, you could play the egg stuff, but like there's a lot of other stuff you couldn't do. So I think Necrium Blade is a straight up 5. I think it's the entire reason to play Death Rattle Rogue, and the only question is, can the rest of the Death Rattle cards actually support Necrium Blade to me?
Alright. Then we're moving on to the next one that got a lot of comments. It's 2 mana, 1/1 rare mech. Pogo Hopper. Battle cry, gain +2/+2 for each other Pogo Hopper you played this game. So obviously after like we'll talk about just now Lab Recruiter and some of the synergies, Pogo Hopper's obviously the card that they're trying to aim. It's a complete meme because you're gonna have to literally just try and Lab Recruiter it and shuffle like copies to try and get as many as you can. And sure, I mean the first one is just bad. The 2 mana 1/1's terrible, right? The second one is okay, a 2 mana 3/3. And then obviously after that they get better. But like the thing is you have to go so much length to make this better, to make this work. It's just a pure meme. So like this is a 1. I don't think this is ever going to be a competitive card.
Yep, I think it's as you said, it's just not worth it. It's a 1.
It's a 1. And then next card.
Next up we have Crazed Chemist. Crazed Chemist is a 5 mana 4/4. Common with combo, give a friendly minion +4 attack. So a 4/4 minion with a cold blood stuck on it. I mean, ultimately, I think Crazed Chemist is not as bad as it seems, just because getting that extra cold blood for free is decent. I'm just not really sure what decks I'd actually want to play this in. In Odd Rogue in particular, the 5 slots is very contested with Fungalmancer,
Valspine,
Valspine, and
Cobalt. Cobalt
Cobalt
Scalebane.
Scalebane. Not many people are playing it. Some are, but it's maybe still
Greenskin.
better than the Chemist. But yeah, Greenskin was the one I couldn't think of the name of.
Captain Greenskin and obviously Leroy, but Leroy's not truly a 5-drop, really.
Yeah. So that's the big issue there for me with Craze Chemist.
And you need to still activate the combo, right? So
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm not sold on it. I just think it's a solid 1.
I think, yeah, I don't know. It is really difficult to make it work for me, and okay, I can go with giving it a 1 too. Although I'm not. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of other cards I've given 1s, but it is still probably a 1 ultimately. I don't think it'll actually see competitive play.
Yeah.
And then next up we have another terrible card. You want to tell us about Violet Haze?
A 3-mana common spell, Violet Haze. Add 2 random Death Rattle cost to your hand. So once again, more Death Rattle synergies. Blizzard are really trying to force this a bit much. And like this card particularly, I'm not a fan of. I mean, random Death Rattle cards, as we've already discussed with talking about Myra Rotspring, there are some really terrible Death Rattle cards. And I mean, sure, you can high roll and get I don't know, what are even good ones you can get? I mean, the thing is, you're spending 3 mana to do nothing. You basically played Arcade Intellect, but it's worse than...
There are way too many bad Death Rattles. It's bad. It's so much worse than Mimic Pod. If I want 2 cards for my 3 mana, I'm rather going to have 2 cards for my deck. Even if I'm playing a Death Rattle deck, I'd rather have 2 Death Rattles that are in my deck if I draw a Death Rattle of Mimic Pod. So Violet Haze is just a straight up 1. The most garbage card here for Rogue.
Yeah.
Even so much more garbage than Pogo Hopper. That's how garbage
Wow. I'm going to love it. Hey, you could get more Pogo Hoppers.
No, you can't. That doesn't have Death Rattle.
Oh, shit, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay.
It's that garbage. It can't even give you more Pogo Hoppers. Something that can give you more Pogo Hoppers, though, is Lab Recruiter. Lab Recruiter is a 2-mana 3/2 common with Battle Cry. Shuffle 3 copies of a friendly minion into your deck. I'm not excited about the Pogo Hopper synergy. I don't think either of us are. Mostly, we're looking at this in terms of like its use with Felderai Strider. Because when you play the Felderai Strider, or play more of them later, you can get more and more spiders. Late in the game, it gives rogues a way to not fatigue themselves too much. And, I mean, there is some potential with, stopping the fatigue from the Myra's Unstable Element as well. Ultimately, though, I think its best application will probably be in Kingsbane Rogue to give you some access to some of the more... some of the other like weapon buff minions,
or more shiny finders.
or more shiny finders. But I mean, probably at that stage in the game, you don't really need the shiny finders, and a lot of the time, you don't want to convolute your draw with minions versus the Kingsbane itself. So yeah, I mean that's the issue with Lab Recruiter. There is a potential for its use in Quest Rogue as well. Because you can shuffle just more resources into your deck. You're not necessarily expecting to draw those and finish your quest with them, but if they're just more resources, then that at least prevents the control decks from just fatiguing you of resources, which some of them can now that the minions are only 4/4s.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and the last thing about it is, on the plus side, is the 2-mana 3/2, so it's not the worst thing to just play as a tempo 2 drop if need be. Sure. But the other synergy is this with the neutral card. What's it called?
Augmented Elec.
Augmented Elec. I mean, therefore you can go for like wombo combo, where you shuffle 6 copies of like.
Yeah.
I mean, the ultimate dream, right? Is you play like Lab Recruiter with the Elec and Folderai, and then you play Myra's Unstable Element, right? Over the course of a few turns.
Oh, okay, sure.
So
but you're gonna overdraw. Like, you're going to overdraw most of your spiders, so it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You're going to draw them, and they're not going to have space on the board. So that doesn't matter.
Oh, right, sure.
We only have 7 board slots.
Damn it, we need more boards. Give us more board slots, Blizzard.
Yeah, but I think there is serious potential for Lab Recruiter to be a decent tool for rogue decks. I mean, a lot of the rogue decks tend to draw through most of their cards, so having the minions in your deck rather than, like, getting them in your hand is powerful enough. And I think Lab Recruiter might just be pushing that far enough. So I'm going to give Lab Recruiter a 3.
I'm going to give it a 4.
Okay, so we've spoken a little bit about the decks so far, but let's have a look and dive right into them. Now, first off, we're going to be looking at my take on the Cube, Egg, Deathrattle, Hunter. Rogue.
Rogue.
All of these are going to be Deathrattle Rogues, weirdly enough, because we didn't really want to look at like Miracle Rogue, Kingsbane Rogue, or Odd Rogue and how they change, because they're mostly relatively small changes. I think the sprint version of Miracle Rogue is looking like it'll be more popular going forward. But for this version, for this deck, we have some synergy with Devil Saw Egg, the Necrium Blade, and Carnivorous Cube. And then we've also got Elven Minstrel to help us find our relatively limited set of minions. The big combo in this deck, which we haven't explained yet, is with Leroy Jenkins and Shadow Stepping Leroy. You can have a 3-mana Leroy. And then the turn after that, you can play Leroy, attack face with it, obviously, Cube, and then you can prep the Necrium Vial to get 4 more Leroys on the board, effectively doing 30 damage in one turn. So that's the 10-mana, 5 if you count the Shadow Step setup card, OTK. And then there are some scenarios where if you're just able to apply enough pressure and you can like cube a Leroy and Necrium Blade, you can work that out. And obviously there's the Devil Saw Egg, Necrium Blade, Cold Blood kind of synergy.
So yeah, lots of just Deathrattle shenanigans.
Yeah. And I've also chosen to include the Cavern Shiny Finder as a way to find the Necrium Blade, because I actually thought that was pretty powerful, pretty important. And obviously it curves fairly well as well.
Okay, yeah. And I mean, you've got a lot of love card draw. Obviously, just trying to cycle through the deck. No Myra's Unstable Element though for you.
No, I think it's not really worth it because you can just lose some of the combo pieces from it, and there's a few too many combo pieces. So a lot of the time, your hand might be too big for Myra's to actually be that good. You know, with Myra's Unstable Element, you want to be playing decks where you're going to empty your hand generally, and that's not really what this deck's going to do.
Yeah.
It does have Sonya as well. Sonya is something you can use to trade off like the cubes or even trade off the Leroy to make them cheaper as well. I mean, trading off the Leroy will leave you with a 25 damage combo, I think it is, which means you would need the Cold Bloods or Eviscerates to combine, but it also kind of reduces the need to have prep as well in the same turn. So it gives you some flexibility there. And I've also got Valera in case you need to set up for the combo by just protecting yourself for a turn, or if you need to actually get the death rattles, if you need to actually get the like any doubles from any of the cards. You know, you don't need it for the combo, but it might be something you need for the rest of the other deck, or sorry, for the other cards, just to kind of get to that combo stage. Okay, but let's have a look at your version of this deck instead. You've gone for a little bit more of a value route here. Talk us through this list.
So yeah, I've gone for still I have the cube, like the sort of Carnivorous Cube, Necrium Vial, and Necrium Blade synergies. But I've gone I've still got Leroy and the eggs, but I've gone for like a sort of potential more value options in the form of like Cairn, Bloodhoof, and the Lich King. So obviously, you could still, in certain matchups go like Carnivorous Cube on your Lich King and then like proc the Blade or the Vial to, get more Lich Kings. But like you've got the similar combos to get like Leroy Jenkins for a lot of damage. Just be a little bit better on the board is kind of what I think my version was aiming to do.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. You're going for a much more of a value plan here, rather than mine, which is more focused on the combo. But you still have all those combo pieces as well. And I suppose you're relying on like Saronite chain gangs and stuff to keep you alive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've only run the one Saronite chain gang just to not die.
Sure. Not dying is fairly good. It does sometimes give you a cube target too, which is not irrelevant.
Yeah, there's some matches where you just need the more taunts, but yeah. So
I mean, you
It'll
can
be
like
interesting to
Necrium
see.
Blade into Saronite Chain Gang into cube one of the Chain Gangs if they survive and attack with a blade for its second charge, and then you still get some more Chain Gangs, which is not terrible.
Yeah,
Okay, and then
but yeah,
there's
so it'll be
yeah.
yes.
Okay, there's one more combo deck to talk
And
about,
then
and that's the Malygos one. So when building this, the first thing we kind of thought about a lot with Necrium Blade was Cube, but there's actually another interesting combo with Cobalt Illusionist. So Cobalt Illusionist, 4 mana 3/3 that summons a 1/1 copy of a minion from your hand on its Deathrattle. So by setting up a deck that doesn't really have too many minions, we can actually set that up into Malygos. So there's a pretty decent chance Malygos is the only minion in your hand. We have the Shiny Finders and the Razor Petal Lashes early on just to play out. The Razor Petal Lashes just give you some the one damage Razor Petals that you can combo with your Malygos for damage. And then we've also got the Elven Minstrel, which in this deck is particularly powerful because it finds you those key combo pieces you need, the Cobalt Illusionists and the Malygos, of course. And then I actually ended up cutting the Valspine Slayers from this deck because that was what we first had in the deck because I actually wanted to just have less minions and make the combo more reliable. Ultimately, there's a couple ways to get to 30 or more damage with this deck. You've got the Cobalt Illusionist, then you can attack with the Necrium Blade, and you have like Sinister Strike, Eviscerate, which is 34 damage. Yeah, 34 damage. Then there's some combos with Razor Petal Ashes and Shivs that you can put in there as well that make it work. I've also got Mimic Pod and one Sprint for draw, and then just the Valera to help you hold out. And sometimes you might also need the Valera to kind of copy some of the cards like Eviscerate or Shiv if you need them for that lethal. So you don't have to always save all your burn.
Yeah, this goes back to a little bit. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we spoke on Magma Rages about, in combo decks knowing when to use your burn, like when to save it and when to potentially just kill on, when to stay alive, use it to stay alive, right?
Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, I think this deck, honestly, when I was building it, I think it might actually be a little bit better than the cube deck. It's a lot cheaper. So if you're into combo decks and you're on a budget, this one, I mean, racking it at only 5,000 dust, is not bad. I mean, the only legendaries in it are Malygos and Valera, and honestly, you could probably cut Valera for maybe some other defensive tools. So it does seem like it could be a decent deck. I mean, it could also run the Necrium Vial as well. That is something possible. I think originally was in my build, and then I cut it because you don't really need double Malygos most of the time. But that'll depend on the meta. Sometimes you will if we've got a lot of druids and warriors running around with a ton of armor.
Sure.
Okay, so overall, where do you feel Rogue is going to be then, looking at the meta for Boomsday Project?
So it's a tough one because like the Cube Rogue and like the Malygos sort of rogues, I think are decks that would be quite good at beating slower strategies. So like if the meta slows down, whereas like both these decks, I could probably tell you are probably going to be quite terrible if the meta speeds up quite a lot, which I think a lot of the times Rogue has been.
Yeah.
The one exception I think has been Odd Rogue has been quite good at sort of keeping up, but like Miracle Rogue is and slower combo based decks have always been struggling against fast aggressive decks which just run them over before they can do anything.
Yeah.
So kind of for me it depends.
I think the cube deck is definitely going to be a lot better against those kind of strategies, the more aggressive strategies. The one thought that also came to mind for cards for that deck is Rotten Apple Bomb, which I know you're going to love the idea of that. That's another way you can get healing and taunt in Rogue. And then casters can stop saying Rogue never has taunt or healing. But ultimately, I'm not sure that one's going to be really worthwhile. But it is a tech choice that you can maybe make for that deck as well. I think Necrium Blade is really powerful, and I'm really interested as to the new Rogue archetypes that it'll create. I think Academic Espionage will make the test kind of decks better. And Myra's Unstable Element has a lot of potential. There's that tricky word. But I mean, I think Myra's Unstable Element is pretty good. I'm a lot higher on Rogue this set than we were with Witchwood. Basically, Blinkfox saw a little bit of play. Other than that, none of the rogue cards were any good. This time they've tried to force Deathrattle, and somehow it still managed to be good because some of the cards I think are just good enough. So I'm pretty high on Rogue. I think Miracle Rogue will still be fine. It's going to definitely tend a little bit more towards the sprint rather than the Gadgetzan and Auctioneer builds. And then I think that Odd Rogue will still be alright, especially if people are getting very greedy early on. You're going to be able to smash people in the face with Odd Rogue, and then, Myra's Unstable Element when you run out of cards. So I think Rogue is going to be in a pretty good place in the new expansion, and mostly I'm just excited to try out some of these Deathrattle Rogues with Necreum Blade.
You just want to play combo decks.
Well, I want to play like a new Rogue deck, right? I mean,
Sure.
Odd Rogue was, a new deck, sure. But I mean, otherwise it's just like Miracle Rogue, which is fun, sure. But like, I want to see. I'm really amped on Necreum Blade. I'm gonna be sad if it sucks because Rogue. I mean, Blizzard have had a history of printing really bad weapons for Rogue, so it'll be nice to see if they've actually printed a good one for a change.
Sure.
Okay, so if you have any thoughts about any of these rogue decks, if you're sad that we didn't cover a test deck, for instance, you can let us know in the comments. You can also find us on Twitter. Make sure to like, share, subscribe the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and do the other stuff to the video. Thanks a lot, everyone. We will see you in the next video.